Your iPhone is sitting somewhere within reach of your hand right now. You did not think about how it got there. You never do. But here is what actually happened before it reached you. That phone crossed a strip of water in northeastern Egypt that is, at its narrowest point, less than 200 meters wide. Not 200 kilometers. 200 meters. You could throw a baseball across it, and through that strip of water, which a single country controls entirely, moves 12% of everything the world trades. 12%. That means $1 in every $8 of global commerce passes through a ditch that Egypt dug in the desert. Your phone, your sneakers, the coffee you had this morning, the car parts sitting in a factory waiting to become your next vehicle. All of it passed through that ditch, and Egypt charges a toll on every single ship that uses it. In 2023, the toll generated over $10 billion in a single year, for a single country, from a single canal. That is more money than the entire GDP of many European nations. And until recently, almost nobody in the news questioned whether Egypt should be allowed to charge it, because the alternative, sailing all the way around the southern tip of Africa, adds 3 extra weeks to every voyage. And in global trade, 3 weeks is not an inconvenience. It is a catastrophe. This is the Suez Canal, the most important ditch in the history of human civilization. It belongs to one country, one government, one president, and it can be closed, taxed, or denied to any ship on Earth at any time, for any reason Egypt decides. Stand on the western bank of the canal at Port Said and watch what happens every morning at first light. The convoy begins. Not one ship, not 5. A parade of steel giants, nose to tail, stretching as far as you can see. Container ships the length of 4 city blocks, stacked with boxes higher than a 20-story building. Supertankers so heavy that they displace more water than the Empire State Building weighs. Chemical carriers. Car carriers holding 12,000 vehicles in their bellies. Roll-on, roll-off ships that could swallow an entire parking garage. And they are all moving through a channel barely wide enough for 2 of them to pass simultaneously. The canal is just over 190 kilometers long. That is shorter than the distance from New York City to Philadelphia. You could drive the length of it in under 2 hours. But sailing it in a convoy, in a vessel the size of a small city, takes between 12 and 16 hours. Every ship must slow to a crawl. They queue at both ends and process through in organized groups under the control of the Suez Canal Authority. And here is the number that makes shipping executives wake up at night. A single large container ship pays between $400,000 and $1 million in toll fees for one transit. One passed through one ditch. In 16 hours, Egypt collects more money from a single ship than most Americans earn in 20 years. The Suez Canal Authority controls every convoy, every slot, every speed limit, every fee schedule. You do not negotiate with them. You do not find an alternative supplier. You pay what they say when they say it, or you sail 10,000 additional kilometers around the Cape of Good Hope. That is the entirety of their leverage, and it is enough to make them one of the most powerful economic entities on the planet. Here is the part that most people have never been told. Egypt did not build this canal. A French company built it. Between 1859 and 1869, using Egyptian labor under conditions that historians describe with words like forced and lethal, a French engineering project carved a waterway through the Sinai Desert that connected the Mediterranean to the Red Sea for the first time in history. When it opened, it immediately cut the sailing distance between Europe and Asia by 40%. What used to take months suddenly took weeks. The company that built it charged every ship that used it. For nearly a century, the revenue flowed primarily to European and British shareholders. Egypt received a small royalty and a canal running through its own territory. Then, on July 26, 1956, Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser stood before a crowd in Alexandria and announced on live radio, in a single speech, that Egypt was nationalizing the canal, taking it back. The crowd went insane. Within days, Britain, France, and Israel had launched a joint military invasion to retake it. The United States, in a move that shocked the world, told its own allies to stand down. The Soviet Union threatened nuclear retaliation if the invasion continued. And at the end of that crisis, which lasted weeks and nearly started a Third World War, the most powerful Western military alliance in history had been forced to back down by one man in Cairo who simply said, "This ditch is in our soil, and it belongs to us." Egypt kept the canal, and every ship in the world has been paying Egypt ever since. Today, the Suez Canal Authority is one of the most profitable government enterprises on the planet. In 2015, Egypt spent $9 billion widening and expanding the canal, adding a parallel channel that doubled its capacity. Egypt did not do this because it loves maritime logistics. Egypt did it because every additional ship per day is another $400,000 to $1 million in revenue. The canal is not infrastructure. It is a taxation machine. And Egypt invested $9 billion of borrowed money to make that machine more efficient. But here is what the finance reports never explain. Egypt does not simply charge a flat toll. The fee structure is calculated on a vessel's tonnage, cargo type, direction of travel, and Egypt's own quarterly pricing decisions. In slow periods, Egypt has offered emergency discounts of up to 65% to attract diverted traffic. In peak periods, it raises rates. It is simultaneously a monopoly and a dynamic pricing engine, with no competitor, no regulator, and no appeal process. If Egypt decides your ship pays more today than it did yesterday, your ship pays more. You have no recourse except Africa. That is a level of pricing power that Amazon, Google, and Apple would envy. Now, here's what happened in 2024, and this is where it becomes personal for you. Houthi militants in Yemen, backed by Iran and responding to the war in Gaza, began launching missiles and drones at commercial ships in the Red Sea. Ships that had nothing to do with Israel, Gaza, or any military operation. Container ships carrying your Christmas gifts. Tankers carrying the oil that heats your home, car carriers moving vehicles to dealerships. The Houthis attacked them anyway, because they were there, because they could, and because disrupting global trade creates political pressure. Within weeks, the entire global shipping industry made the same calculation. The Red Sea is too dangerous. Go around Africa. The number of ships using the Suez Canal in 2024 dropped by 50%. In a single year, 13,000 transits instead of 26,000. Egypt's canal revenue collapsed from over $10 billion to approximately $4 billion, a loss of $6 billion in 12 months. President Sisi appeared on Egyptian television and told his nation that regional challenges had cost them $7 billion in canal earnings. He did not say Houthi missiles. He did not say Yemen. He said regional challenges. Because admitting that a group of militants in a country Egypt has no control over had just cut your national income in half is not a speech any president wants to give. But here is what that 50% drop did to you directly. The ships that stopped using the canal did not stop moving. They rerouted, adding 10 to 14 days to every voyage. Every extra day at sea is tens of thousands of dollars in additional fuel costs, crew wages, and port fees. Those costs do not disappear. They get passed to the shipping company. The shipping company passes them to the importer. The importer passes them to the retailer. The retailer passes them to you, standing in a store, holding a product that costs more than it should, because a group of militants in Yemen decided to shoot at a ship. The price of shipping a container from Shanghai to Rotterdam, which had recovered to roughly $1,500 after the pandemic, spiked back to $5,000, $6,000. Not because a factory burned down. Not because workers went on strike, because one waterway became temporarily dangerous to use, and there is no substitute for it. This is the geometry of a choke point. The world built its entire trade architecture around shortcuts. The Suez Canal is the biggest shortcut ever constructed, and shortcuts, by definition, are single points of failure. There is no backup Suez Canal. There is no second ditch through Egypt. There is no emergency rerouting plan that does not cost every company on Earth billions of dollars in extra operating costs. You ordered something from Amazon last week. You got 2-day shipping. You did not think about the canal, but someone in a logistics department somewhere did. And they built a margin into that product's price to account for the possibility that the canal might, at any moment, become unusable. And the instability does not stop with missiles. Egypt is one of the most economically fragile large countries in the world. Its national debt exceeds 90% of its GDP. Its currency has devalued catastrophically multiple times in recent years. The IMF has extended emergency bailout credit lines to Cairo repeatedly. The canal's revenue is not a luxury item in Egypt's budget. It is a structural dependency. When it drops by $6 billion in a single year, Egypt faces not just a budget shortfall, but a potential sovereign debt crisis. A government facing that kind of pressure makes decisions that stable governments never make. And history tells you exactly what those decisions can look like. Egypt has closed the canal before. It closed it for 8 years from 1967 to 1975, after the Six-Day War with Israel. For 8 years, 15 ships were physically trapped inside the canal, unable to move in either direction. Their crews, from 14 different nations, formed a community. They called themselves the Yellow Fleet, named after the desert sand that settled on their hulls over 8 years of stillness. They organized mail delivery between ships. They created their own postal stamp. They held their own version of the Olympics. They waited 8 years for diplomats to resolve a war before they could sail out. The global economy of 1967 rewrote it around Africa and survived. But that economy moved less than 10% of the volume that moves today, on ships a fraction of their current size. A closure now would not be a detour. It would be an amputation of the global trade system, administered without anesthetic. There is one final thing that almost never gets said in public. The Suez Canal is the primary reason Egypt matters to the Western world. Remove it, and Egypt is a populous, economically struggling nation in a volatile region. Important regionally, but not essential to global trade. Keep it, and Egypt holds a veto card over 12% of world commerce. Every diplomatic negotiation with Cairo, every arms sale, every IMF loan discussion, every conversation about human rights or democratic backsliding happens in the shadow of that canal. Western governments apply pressure to Egypt carefully, quietly, rarely in public, because at the back of every meeting room is the same unspoken arithmetic. If Egypt becomes too unstable, the canal becomes unpredictable. And if the canal becomes unpredictable, the supply chain that connects your factory to your phone, your oil field to your gas tank, your farm to your supermarket, becomes unpredictable with it. One country, one ditch, one invisible veto over the global economy. The next time you fill up your car, the next time a package arrives at your door ahead of schedule, the next time you check a price tag and it seems reasonable. Somewhere in the Egyptian desert, a convoy of steel giants is moving slowly through a channel 200 meters wide, paying whatever Egypt asks. Because 60 years ago, one man decided that a ditch in his soil belonged to his people. He was right, and the rest of the world has been living with that decision ever since. What do you think? Should the world have built a backup? Or is this just the price of a system nobody thought would last this long? Tell us in the comments. And if you want to understand the other choke point that nearly broke global trade in 2023, not from missiles but from a drought, that video is already waiting for you.